She explains to her how the notes app works. Like, oh, do you have a paper and pen? I can write this down. Oh, you can use the notes app. Look, you can keep notes on the phone. Like, we've never met a phone before in our lives. And it's just like, hi, I'm Carly with Bookish Pixie Reads. Thank you for coming back and joining me. This is going to be the first video in a series that I've been wanting to do, where I talk about cozy mysteries and the recipe or the pattern or whatever the thing is in the back of the book, the ones that are gimmicky. Like, I struggle with calling Agatha Christie's cozy mysteries. I know they are, but like, what I consider cozy mysteries are the ones that are published in the last 20 years or so, where there's a very strong gimmick, where it's a bookshop, a coffee shop, a knitting shop, a bakery, a perfumery, like where there's a thing and there's like a dead body in their bookshop, every single book. And in the back of it, if it's a cupcake shop, they'll have like cupcake recipes, or a tea shop, they'll have tea infused products, either like soaps or things that are made with tea in the back of the book. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun? And they're usually like 3 or 4 things in the back of the book, and if I made one, not all of them, but made one from each of the back of the book. So I'm going to talk about the mystery and then talk about the thing that I made and my thoughts on it. So, cozy mysteries and recipes, I think I shall call it. But the first one I'm going to talk about is Death by Bubble Tea by Jennifer J. Chow. I read this back in June. It's the first in an LA night market mystery. And this was one of my most anticipated books of the year when I found out that it existed. I saw it on one of the ARC websites. I saw it, I requested it, I got denied. But once I found out that it existed, I was like TBRing this immediately, because trying to diversify my reading, I've realized that hashtag cozy mysteries so white. Like, just so many of them are just all white women. And there's very little like diversity in them at all. And I'm not going to stop reading them because I like them, but if I can find other cozy mystery series that aren't all white women, I want to find them. If you know of them, let me know in the comments. I was really excited about this one, and it kind of let me down. Our main character, her name is Yale. Now, if I didn't say, guys, that I was excited about its diversity, I knew immediately from the night market that it was going to be Asian characters. Night markets in Asia, I think I learned from probably some food shows and from Crazy Rich Asians. There's a whole scene at night markets where it's just food stalls, and each food stall makes that one specific thing, and it's amazing, and then you can go and you buy different things from different stalls, and that's your dinner or whatever. And I live in a place where we don't really have like a Chinatown. We have tons of Vietnamese food that is amazing. We have good Chinese food, but we don't have like a Chinatown. We don't have a night market culture where I'm from. So I was really excited about this because I love the idea of like night markets. I would love to go to a night market. It's a bucket list thing. So I was really excited about this one. A little let down by it. I thought the characters are really weird. Like, just, it's weird. We'll get into it. So our main character, her name is Yale. I don't know if she's given an actual age, but she's mid-20s, I would say. She loses her job. Her dad owns a Chinese restaurant, like it's been in the family for ages. Her mom died pre-story, and that's a big part of her as a character, is that her mom died in a car accident, like an electrical feature of the car stopped working, and then that caused maybe someone to run into her, and so she died. So she is sworn off of technology in a very bizarre, weird way that I hate. Like, it's detrimental to the story in the dumbest of ways, and I can't handle it. We'll get to that in a bit. But, so her father was like working himself to the bone. There's this little area of town in my head, because it takes place in Los Angeles. In my head, it was the Grove. I always see the Grove in shows and celebrities' Instagram feeds. It's like a high-class shopping, outdoor maybe shopping district. I don't know, something like that. I'm not from there. It also reminds me of Perkins Row in Baton Rouge. So this shopping center decides they want to hold a night market. And it's not solely like an Asian food night market, which has always been like my bucket list situation, but it's a bunch of like craft vendors and food vendors, and they're gonna have like music on and dancing groups on stage. It's just gonna be a whole event. And because it's Halloween, people can come dressed up in costumes. And since her dad owns this Chinese restaurant, he is invited to become a vendor, and he wants Yale and her cousin Celeste to run the stall for this thing, especially now that she doesn't have a job. He's trying to she doesn't want to cook in the restaurant anymore since her mom died. He's trying to just give her something to do. So Celeste is coming, her cousin is coming from Hong Kong, and she holds this bizarrest grudge against this cousin that she hasn't seen since she was 10. That at some point she had this cool chapstick. She asked her if she could use the chapstick, and Celeste said no. And she has held this grudge against this cousin ever since. And it's the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard of. And it very much feels as if the author doesn't want us, the reader, to like Celeste. And because she's a foodstagrammer, she's a food influencer, and the main character's just like, oh, that seems so shallow. And it's just like, you have booktubers and bookstagrammers, and we exist. Like, do you think we're not gonna like Celeste? We're Celeste, just books. And Celeste comes across perfectly fine. Like, she likes nice things, but she comes across as a nice, normal human being, and Yale sometimes just doesn't. It's very weird. And part of the reason she's judgmental about her is just, like I said, she's a social media food influencer, the digitalness of it all, because she's anti-digital, and it's just ridiculous. So you have this night market, everyone's in Halloween costumes. At the end of the market, Yale stumbles upon a dead body. They are in costume. And she's like, oh, I think I saw that person. I think they bought something from us. The police come to investigate. They figure out that something that this dead body had consumed when they were alive was the same item they had served at their stall. So they become prime suspects. And so then it becomes them trying to prove that they didn't do it. Kind of the story. I found the mystery itself a little anemic. Their investigating of it all felt a little weak. It just didn't feel... I read so many mysteries in my lifetime, and it just felt like... I mean, I know it's cozy mysteries. It just felt like it could have been more. And because I already didn't like the characters, and I already didn't... It felt really long. And I'll tell you why in a second. That it just, once that starts happening, you start getting nitpicky, and it just felt, it is so overly descriptive in ways that I do not need. I can't remember, I wish I would have written some of this stuff down, but it was just, parts of it are so overly described. And then it's like her editor told her, a 99-year-old woman is going to read this book and has never used the internet a day in her life. So you need to explain the internet and iPhones. And it's so bizarre, this constant explanation of digital things. And they have what her mental hypocrisies are on what she will use and not use digitally because of this thing that happened to her mom. So her mom dies, I said, in this car accident that may or may not have been caused by an electrical issue. And so she won't ride in a car, but she will ride in a bus. She walks to a lot of places and rides her bike to a lot of places, but she takes buses, but she won't ride in a car. And I'm like, I don't understand the difference. And she doesn't own a laptop. She doesn't own an iPhone, but she will go to the community center to look up stuff on the internet. So she gets the call from her dad to be like, hey, your cousin's coming in. I need you to pick her up from the airport. And instead of just going, okay, what's the flight info? We have to get this whole description of her walking down to the community center and logging into the computer and getting the flight info. I didn't need the extra page and a half of that shenanigans. Just, Dad, what's the flight info? Or we all just assume it happened. I don't need that. And because she can't drive a car, I have to get the whole description of her getting into a bus to go to the airport and then getting her cousin to ride in the bus with her luggage, like back, or her cousin's like, yeah, I'm not doing that, I'll just get a taxi. Like, it's so ridiculous, and it doesn't give anything to the story. Like, there's nothing that was solved or not solved, or the clue by her not having or having a car. Like, it is so dumb, and it just adds pages to the story where it's so unnecessary. And because her cousin is like a foodstagrammer, she uses Instagram a lot, and then they have to like explain to us what hashtags are and how Instagram works, and they don't just be like, oh, it's a social media that you can show pictures. Like, she explains to her how the Notes app works. Like, oh, do you have a paper and pen? I can write this down. Oh, you can use the Notes app. Look, you can keep notes on the phone. Like, we've never met a phone before in our lives, and it's just like, I'm like, yeah, I get maybe she doesn't use one, but like, I'm sure she's 25. Like, she's seen a phone. She knows what the Notes app is. Like, it's the most ridiculously overwrought situation I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, if you're willing to go to the community center to look stuff up, like, I don't know why that's different than you owning a computer, or I don't know, just the hypocrisy's there, and it's just this weird, ridiculous, like, shenanigans of a thing that I just could not handle. So I'm giving this about 2.5 stars. I think I'm gonna read the second book, because they give you how most cozy mysteries give you like the first chapter of the next book in the series, and I read that, and because I can't feel like a book's complete unless you read every single page, because I'm that idiot. And so I read the first chapter of the next book, and because now they're friends, they resolve, and like her ridiculous grudge against this cousin, that resolves, and it so they're trying to be friends. And so I'm like, well, at least we won't have that. And the first chapter, it seemed like a better flow of the story, and so maybe we can work some of those kinks out. So I'll give at least one more go, and we'll see how that one is. But so one of the recipes in the back of the book, there's some recipes for like boba tea. She makes a lot of boba tea. That's their her stall at the night market. So if that was something interesting to you, there's boba recipes in the back of the book. So what I made was the recipe that they called the spicy cucumber salad. And it uses 6 Persian cucumbers, 2 cloves of garlic, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of black vinegar, which I bought. Black vinegar is not balsamic vinegar. I got it at an Asian food market. Half tablespoon of sesame oil, 1/4 teaspoon of chili crisps. The author recommended the brand Lagoma's Spicy Chili Crisp, which I also got at an Asian food market. After the fact, I found what looks like a knockoff version at Trader Joe's, and also maybe World Market, but I definitely got it at an Asian food store, and salt. And essentially, you slice the cucumbers in like little mandolin. I kind of just didn't bust that out, just chopped them up in kind of thick cucumber-y, thickish slices. You mix everything together, you chill it. It doesn't tell you how many this serves. I made half of this recipe, and that is a lot. Like, this would make like a good, like if you made the recipe and you split it as like a little side dish. Because I made a lot and I was like, that was my lunch. Like, that was my lunch. But it was good, I liked it. I'm a little iffy on the black vinegar. I need to try that again. But it was good, it was fun, it was easy to make. So if you're looking for some new like Asian thing to try, it was really easy enough to make, and not super expensive or anything like that. So the second cozy mystery I'm going to talk about is Bayou Book Thief by Byron, and this is the first in a vintage cookbook mystery series. It takes place in New Orleans. I know Byron has written other cozy mystery series. I have not read them, and I know they take place in the South. I think in Louisiana, but more like plantation country, but this is New Orleans proper, which always makes me a little nervous because I'm from suburbia of New Orleans. I went to college in New Orleans, and there's another series that gets New Orleans so wrong, and so I've been really nervous about this one. And I have to say, she kind of gets us right. I looked her up. I think she went to college at Tulane, and I think she comes back often enough because it really feels like she got the vibe. You know what I mean? I have to give her props on her diversity levels. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, and I don't know what her other books are like, and if this is something that sort of came out of Black Lives Matter, or the conversation of we need more people of color in publishing. And because the other mystery series also that's in New Orleans has 0 Black people. Like, if you've been in New Orleans, like, we're a melting pot. We've got people of all diversities. We have a lot of different things going on here. A lot of different cultures and a lot of different ethnicities happening. And for it to just be all white is super not accurate to us. And our lead character is white, but she was adopted by a Black woman who married a Mexican man. I think our lead cop is Hispanic. There's a restaurant they all go to after work that is owned by a Vietnamese person. It's very much making an effort of being diverse, and I appreciate that so much. This takes place in the Garden District of New Orleans, which is the big fancy houses. A lot of big fancy houses. People love to like drive around and look at them. Some of the houses you can take tours in, I think. But that's kind of where this is. It's about our lead character. Her name is Ricky. She's a 28-year-old. Her husband died pre-story. Her old boss is basically Bernie Madoff, who got arrested for a Ponzi scheme. And so she moves back to NOLA. She was born in New Orleans. Parents moved to California when she's around 7, and only just moves back, which works really well. Because I find like cozy mysteries that take place in a very specific place or about a very specific thing, and you've got characters telling other characters about a thing they should already know because they were born and raised, or because that's their like college degree, but they're telling each other these things because they're telling us these things. But it doesn't work as like character stuff because they should already know, right? And it works for this because she was 7 when she left. So to have we have weird street names. We have a street name called Burgundy, but it's spelled Burgundy. And so people always pronounce, people who are from out of town, like, oh, I want to go to Burgundy. And we're like, oh, it's Burgundy. And we have a street called Milan. Well, it's not called, it's Milan, but it's spelled Milan, like Milan in Italy, but it's Milan. And so they have those conversations, and that actually, it's telling us, the reader, about New Orleans to make us feel like we're from here, but it's telling the main character, who isn't really a local because she left when she was 7. So that stuff really works. But the story is about, so she collects vintage cookbooks, like that's her hobby, that's her thing. And I'm super into this gimmick. It's so much fun, the kitsch of it all, and there is these people there's this pre-story, there's this famous restaurateur, her name is Genevieve V, is how they refer to her, but Genevieve V. Charbonnet, and she had this famous restaurant. I think it's still a thing, and they are taking her family, her surviving family, is taking the house that she grew up in, or that she lived in, this Garden District house, and making it a food museum. And Ricky, our lead, pitched the idea of running a gift shop out of this museum that will sell vintage cookbooks and vintage kitchenware. And they accept it, so that's the story. It takes place out of this house, and she's selling and the gimmick is these vintage cookbooks and kitchenware. And it's fun because you actually see her going on eBay and bidding on stuff, and she talks about these these books, and she goes to thrift stores, and some of these gadgets she buys, I'm like, oh, that's cool, let me Google that. What is that? That's neat. And so I actually really kind of loved that. But they're stocking, someone donates a bunch of books, they find a dead body in one of these donated boxes of books, and it's a former coworker who just got fired. And Ricky is really afraid that this is going to kill, like it's a new museum, it's newly opened. She's afraid it's going to kill business, which if you know New Orleans, it probably wouldn't. It'd probably drive business. But it's sort of about them trying to solve the mystery because she really wants to keep this job. She needs this job and she loves these people and she wants the business to stay open. So this is not like a dislike. For me, it was very loud in the sense of what this was inspired by. If you've ever been to New Orleans, I'm sure you heard of Commander's Palace. You can Google it. It's one of our most famous restaurants in the city. You should go to lunch there if you're ever in town. They have a really decent, like a $20, $22 like prefixed menu lunch with like 25% martinis. Like everyone loves it. It's great. But it's this beautiful restaurant in the middle of like the Garden District. And Ella Brennan, the Brennan family owns a bunch of restaurants in the city. There's like a fight. It's sort of split, but you have like a Brennan's restaurant. You have Commander's. But Ella Brennan ran Commander's. And she was this famous restaurateur. Emerald came out of her. Like Emerald worked his way up and became the head chef of Commander's, and that's why we have Emerald. Bam! Today he worked for Ella Brennan at Commander's. Like this is so Ella Brennan. Like it's weird because Ella Brennan and Commander's are both mentioned in this story. And it doesn't like affect the story. It just, to me, I just kept going. I'm like, well, this is Ella Brennan. Like this is her. There's actually a really interesting documentary that I did not write down, and I will put it in the thing below. It used to be on Netflix. I'm not sure if it's available now, but it's a really interesting documentary about her and her life and her as a restaurateur and what she did for apparently the restaurant business as a whole throughout the world. Like, she's a huge deal, and that's who this is based off of. But my pluses, I already said, the vibe is dead on. Like, there were so many bits where I was like, well, that seems a bit much. And then I was like, oh, no, we do that. We absolutely do that. We're weird like that. Like, it opens where there's her landlady is dancing down the street dressed up as a mixture of like Wilma Flintstone in 70s disco gear, and I was like, what now? And like, she's part of the marching crew called Yabba Dabba Doo Ya, and it's a mix of Flintstones mixed with ABBA. I died. Y'all, I died. Like, we have marching crews that march in parades, and they're all tongue-in-cheek. The Bearded Oyster, and the Rolling Crew of Elliots, and everybody's dressed like Elliot from E.T., and they all ride bikes, and we have just like really kitschy kind of marching crews, and they have dance rehearsals and all that sort of thing, and I died. This big house has peacocks in the garden, and I was like, then like, not too far away in one of our big parks, there are peacocks that wander around, so it's not too much of a stretch. Like, maybe some of these big estates have peacocks in their some of these big estates have peacocks in their gardens and their yards. I don't know, but it's not too much of a stretch because, yeah, they're at our zoo. It's not like a zoo exhibit. They just wander the zoo, which is right next to one of our big parks, and there are just peacocks around. So I'm sure, yeah, I actually Googled it. After Katrina, I'm not sure if it's still there. There was a rogue peacock in some neighborhood that just wandered around. There's a bit where like her AC is out, and what a nightmare that is and what that feels like. Yeah. There's actually an overarching subplot, and that's going to carry into book 2. And I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I also don't mind. And I don't know how long they're going to carry it on. So that'll be interesting to see what comes of that. I like that it's not just a one where you don't have to ever read it again, where it kind of has a carry through. I like that. And there also is a little bit of talking about like mental health, like veterans' mental health and stuff. So I also appreciated that. I didn't love, there's this bizarre subplot that Ricky worked for a Bernie Madoff-esque character, or a Bernie Madoff-esque person, that he was super rich, got arrested for Ponzi scheming people out of their money, but she like worked for him, but not in a financial sense. She supervised his collection of books, his first editions, blah, blah, blah. And so she loses her job because it's pre-story because of the Bernie Madoff of it all. And she's constantly afraid that people are going to figure out who she was. And at some point, people do, and people come with their cell phones, and a newspaper story is written about it. I mean, I was loosely aware of the Bernie Madoff situation when it happened, but were people following the chefs and the chauffeurs and the people who just did jobs for him? Were people hassling these people? Like, I just don't believe that any of that happened. The author does a weird thing, or what I consider weird, is that some things about New Orleans, she's very accurate about in this sense of like what actually exists. And then chooses to just make up things in the sense of like street names. Like our dead person, the street that he lives on actually exists. The street that Ricky, our main character, lives on does not exist, because I googled it and I was like, oh, I wonder where she lives. That street does not exist. There's a park with the same name, but the street's not there. I'm like, why would you do that? And you also have Ricky drives past the hospital that she was born in, which is now defunct, but the building's still there. It's very iconic in New Orleans. She addresses that. But so it was weird. I don't know. It was weird for me. I'm like, why didn't you just use the same street name? Like, why didn't you just pick a real street? I don't know why you chose to do that. There was one part of the story where air conditioning units were on people's roofs, and I've never seen that here. I looked that up. That happens a lot in like Arizona, or like businesses clearly do. But I've never seen a house that has an air conditioning unit on their roof, or people have to hire, like air conditioning repairmen, people have to bring cranes in to like replace air conditioning units. I don't think that's a thing we do. I've never seen it, never heard about it. I'm very confused by that even was brought up. And part of her like inventiveness. So in real life, so I mentioned that, V. Charbonnet was this restaurateur. She's sort of based off of Ella Brennan for Commander's Palace. Emerald, bam, Chef Emerald came out of Commander's Palace. That he worked his way up to head chef. He worked for Ella, and then he came from that and became famous. She sort of invents an Emerald out of the story, except he's black. And the reason I mention that, because it's not terribly necessary, except that he's supposed to be the nephew of Leah Chase. And Leah Chase is real. She's one of our famous chefs. She passed away a couple years ago. She is who Princess Tiana from The Princess and the Frog is based off of. And that is very well known here locally. Like, Leah Chase is a person. And I find it very odd that you decided to invent a nephew of hers. Like, I don't know, it just felt like, being that she only died just so very recently, it felt weird. Because, like, what if she has family that reads this book and you're like, here's a nephew of Leah Chase? Like, it just, I don't know why you couldn't have just made him a chef who worked his way up. Because he worked for Charbonnet, and now he's famous. He has TV shows, and he's media, and blah, blah, blah. He's Emerald. But I just don't, he's following the Emerald storyline. But I don't know why she just didn't make him up. Like, why she had to make him related to a real life person that actually exists. And not like someone who existed 200 years ago. And yeah, okay, anybody can be related to anybody 200, 300 years ago. But this person, her family, like, the restaurant's still open, her family runs it. Like, it was a weird thing to me. It's going to be weird to no one else but me. But so, I think I'm giving that one like 3.75 stars. Like, I know I just fussed, but there was a lot of this I really liked. The New Orleans vibe is so accurate. But I had fun with this one. I can't wait for the second. So the recipe in the back of the book, the way she presented her back of the book recipes, I thought was so clever and so fun. So like I said, this is about vintage cookbooks, or like the gimmick is vintage cookbooks. And she went through vintage cookbooks and pulls recipes from her personal old cookbooks and kind of republishes them. And she talks about like how some of them are weird, how some of these recipes call for ingredients that in the instructions never use, or they don't get into like super detailed instructions that maybe we're used to. And one of the recipes that she listed, the one that I attempted to make, came from a cookbook that was taking recipes from famous restaurants around the country. And it was sort of like a travelogue cookbook. And Antoine's is one of our oldest restaurants, might be our oldest restaurant. And I actually Googled it and I was wondering because I had some issues with the recipe. And I was curious as to whether or not the original, I found the original, like a little photo of the original recipe. It's exactly the same. So this is not on the author at all. This is how it was published. But French pancakes a la Gelee. The ingredients used 1/2 cups all-purpose flour, 1 egg, 1 egg yolk, 1/8 teaspoon salt, 5 tablespoons whole milk, 1 tablespoon butter melted, 5 tablespoons currant or red raspberry jelly, powdered sugar, and essentially you're making just little crepes. And then rolling jelly in them, or spreading jelly in them, and then rolling them up and making like little jelly rolls. And then putting powdered sugar on top. So you mix all your ingredients, and I want to make the recipe again because I think I failed. I mean, I tried to eat it, I ate it, but I felt it very unclear. This is supposed to make a lot. My stuff didn't make that many because they're like, oh, it's supposed to fill a 5-inch pan, and they're like, oh, once you make your batter, you scoop your batter, and they don't tell you really how much you're supposed to scoop, but it's supposed to fill the bottom of a 5-inch pan. And my scoops were never filling a 5-inch pan, and I don't know how I was supposed to get, and like maybe I was supposed to thin the batter out some more, but it's just like, oh, look at thick cream. And I'm like, it seemed like a thick cream to me. And they don't really give you a how high to make the temperature on the thing, so I was just sort of guessing, and it seemed like it was taking too long. I would like to try it again. Because I think in theory, because like I tried it, I ate it, and it was fine. I sent my husband a picture. He was away when I made it, and he was like, oh, that looks amazing. We should make that again. And I was like, oh, good, because I feel like I need someone else with me to go like, you know what would make this better is if we did this or this. Because I think it would be an interesting thing to make. It'd be cool for parties or like a fancy breakfast in bed. But I love the whole, these are old-fashioned recipes that are maybe hit and miss because of the way they're written. I thought that was cool. So that's it for today. I hope you like this little concept thing that I'm doing, and let me know what y'all think. And let me know if y'all read these books and if you like them, and if you have any good cozy mystery recs, let me know in the comments. And like and notify, subscribe, all the things. Have a good one.